Stories from the Shadows is a Lemon Difficult studio production. Join us on Patreon at patreon.com/lemondifficult for free access to all our podcast episodes, behind-the-scenes content for the Key of Dreams and more. That's patreon.com/lemondifficult. Welcome to Stories from the Shadows, a collection of weird tales of the mysterious and macabre, an offering from the team at Lemon Difficult Studio, featuring the cast of our live immersive show, The Key of Dreams Shadows Lengthen, and special guests. These stories are dark tales of misery and woe. Listener discretion is advised. We are rapidly approaching the end of the month, and it is now less than 2 weeks until the first performance of The Key of Dreams, The Shadows Lengthen. But for now, we return to our story, in which we realise that your dreams coming true is not always something to be desired. We cross now to Borderline Radio, broadcasting from somewhere very close to Treowen, for the conclusion of this story.
Borderline Radio presents Stories from the Shadows, pleasing terrors for the discerning listener.
Tea pursued its cheerful course, and before long, Mrs. Clinton got up. And at that moment, I think I knew what she was going to say. She spoke to me, and what she said was, "Jack will show you to your room. I have given you the room in the tower." At that, for half a second, the horror of the dream took hold of me again, but it quickly passed, and again I felt nothing more than the most intense curiosity. It was not very long before it was amply satisfied. John turned to me. "Right up at the top of the house," he said, "but I think you'll be comfortable. We're absolutely full up. Would you like to go up and see it now? By Jove, I believe that you are right. We are going to have a thunderstorm. How dark it has become." I got up and followed him. We passed through the hall and up the perfectly familiar staircase. Then he opened the door and I went in. And at that moment, sheer unreasoning terror possessed me, and I did not know what I feared. I simply feared. Then, like a sudden recollection, when one remembers a name which has long escaped the memory, I knew what I feared. I feared Mrs. Stone, whose grave, with the sinister inscription, "In evil memory," I had so often seen in my dream, just beyond the lawn which lay below my window. And then, once more the fear passed so completely that I wondered what there was to fear, and I found myself sober and quiet and sane in the room in the tower, the name of which I had so often heard in my dream, and the scene of which was so familiar. I looked around it with a certain sense of proprietorship, and found that nothing had been changed from the dreaming nights in which I knew it so well. Just to the left of the door was the bed, lengthways along the wall, with the head of it in the angle. In a line with it was the fireplace and a small bookcase. Opposite the door, the outer wall was pierced by 2 lattice-paned windows, between which stood the dressing table, while ranged along the 4th wall was the washing stand and a big cupboard. My luggage had already been unpacked, for the furniture of dressing and undressing lay orderly on the washstand and toilet table, while my dinner clothes were spread out on the coverlet of the bed. And then, with a sudden start of unexplained dismay, I saw that there were 2 rather conspicuous objects which I had not seen before in my dreams. One was a life-sized oil painting of Mrs. Stone, and the other a black and white sketch of Jack Stone, representing him as he appeared to me only a week before in the last series of these repeated dreams. a rather secret and evil-looking man of about 30. His picture hung between the windows, looking straight across the room at the other portrait, which hung at the side of the bed. At that I looked next, and as I looked, I felt once more the horror of nightmare seize me. It represented Mrs. Stone as I had seen her last in my dreams, old and withered and white-haired. But in spite of the evident feebleness of body, a dreadful exuberance and vitality shone through the envelope of the flesh, an exuberance wholly malign, a vitality that foamed and frothed with unimaginable evil. Evil beamed from the narrow, leering eyes. It laughed in the demon-like mouth. The whole face was instinct with some secret and appalling mirth. The hands clasped together on the knee seemed shaking with suppressed and nameless glee. Then I saw also that it was signed in the left-hand bottom corner, and wondering who the artist could be, I looked more closely and read the inscription: Julia Stone, by Julia Stone. There came a tap at the door, and John Clinton entered. "Got everything you want?" he asked. "Rather more than I want," I said, pointing to the picture. He laughed. "Hard-featured old lady," he said. "By herself, too, I remember. Anyhow, she can't have flattered herself much." "But don't you see?" I said. "It's scarcely a human face at all. It's the face of some witch, some devil." He looked at it more closely. "Yes, it isn't very pleasant," he said. "Scarcely a bedside manner, eh?" "Yes, I can imagine getting the nightmare if I went to sleep with that close by my bed. I'll have it taken down if you like." "Oh, I really wish you would," I said. He rang the bell, and with the help of a servant we detached the picture and carried it out onto the landing and put it with its face to the wall. "By Jove, the old lady is a weight," said John, mopping his forehead. "I wonder if she had something on her mind." The extraordinary weight of the picture had struck me too. I was about to reply when I caught sight of my own hand. There was blood on it, in considerable quantities, covering the whole palm. "I've cut myself somehow," I said. John gave a little startled exclamation. "Why, I have too," he said. Simultaneously, the footman took out his handkerchief and wiped his hand with it, and I saw there was blood also on his. John and I went back to the tower room and washed the blood off, but neither on his hand nor mine was there the slightest trace of a scratch or cut. It seemed to me that having ascertained this, we both, by a sort of tacit consent, did not allude to it again. Something in my case had dimly occurred to me that I did not wish to think about. It was but a conjecture, but I fancied I knew the same thing had occurred to him. The heat and oppression of the air, for the storm we had all expected was still undischarged, increased very much after dinner, and for some time most of the party, among whom were John Clinton and myself, sat outside on the path bounding the lawn where we had tea. The night was absolutely dark. No twinkle of star or moon ray could penetrate the pall of cloud that overset the sky. By degrees our assembly thinned. The women went up to bed, men dispersed to the smoking or billiard room, and by 11 o'clock my host and I were the only two left. All the evening I thought that he had something on his mind, and as soon as we were alone, he spoke. "The man who helped us with the picture had blood on his hand too. Did you notice?" he said. "I asked him just now if he'd cut himself, and he said he supposed he had, but that he could find no mark of it. Now where did that blood come from?" By dint of telling myself that I was not going to think about it, I had succeeded in not doing so, and did not want, especially just at bedtime, to be reminded of it. "I don't know," I said, "and I don't really care so long as the picture of Mrs. Stone is not by my bed." He got up. "But it is odd," he said. "Ha! Now you'll see another odd thing." A dog of his, an Irish terrier by breed, had come out of the house as we talked. The door behind us into the hall was open, and a bright oblong of light shone across the lawn to the iron gate which led on to the rough grass outside where the walnut tree stood. I saw that the dog had all his hackles up, bristling with rage and fright. His lips were curled back from his teeth as if he were ready to spring at something, and he was growling to himself. He took not the slightest notice of his master or me, but stiffly and tensely walked across the grass to the iron gate. There he stood for a moment, looking through the bars and still growling. Then, of a sudden, his courage seemed to desert him. He gave one long howl and scuttled back to the house with a curious crouching sort of movement. "He does that 6 times a day," said John. "He sees something which he both hates and fears." I walked to the gate and looked over it. Something was moving on the grass outside, and soon a sound which I could not instantly identify came to my ears. Then I remembered what it was. It was the purring of a cat. I lit a match and saw the purrer, a big blue Persian, walking round and round in a little circle just outside the gate, stepping high and ecstatically, with tail carried aloft like a banner. Its eyes were bright and shining, and every now and then it put its head down and sniffed at the grass. I laughed. "The end of that mystery, I am afraid," I said. "Here's a large cat having Walpurgis night all alone." "Oh yes, that's Darius," said John. "Spends half the day and night there. But that's not the end of the dog mystery, for Toby and he are best of friends, but the beginning of the cat mystery. What's the cat doing there? And why is Darius pleased while Toby is terror-stricken?" At that moment, I remembered the rather horrible detail of my dreams when I saw through the gate, just where the cat was now, the white tombstone with the sinister inscription. But before I could answer, the rain began, as suddenly and heavily as if a tap had been turned on, and simultaneously the big cat squeezed through the bars of the gate and came leaping across the lawn to the house for shelter. Then it sat in the doorway, looking out eagerly into the dark. It spat and struck at John with its paw as he pushed it in order to close the door. Somehow, with the portrait of Julia Stone in the passage outside, the room in the tower had absolutely no alarm for me, and as I went to the bed, feeling very sleepy and heavy, I had nothing more than interest for the curious incident about our bleeding hands and the conduct of the cat and the dog. The last thing I looked at before I put my light out was the square empty space by my bed where the portrait had been. Here, the paper was of its original full tint of dark red. Over the rest of the walls it had faded. Then I blew out my candle and instantly fell asleep. My awakening was equally instantaneous, and I sat bolt upright in bed under the impression that some bright light had been flashed in my face, though it was now absolutely pitch dark. I knew exactly where I was, in the room which I had dreaded in dreams, but no horror that I had ever felt when asleep approached the fear that now invaded and froze my brain. Immediately, after a peal of thunder cracked just above the house, but the probability that it was only a flash of lightning that awoke me gave no reassurance to my galloping heart. Something I knew was in the room with me, and instinctively I put out my right hand, which was nearest to the wall, to keep it away, and my hand touched the edge of a picture frame hanging close to me. I sprang out of bed, upsetting the small table that stood by it, and I heard my watch, candle, and matches clatter to the floor. But for the moment there was no need of light, for a blinding flash leaped out of the clouds and showed me that by my bed again hung the picture of Mrs. Stone, and instantly the room went into blackness again. But in that flash I saw another thing also, namely a figure that leaned over the end of my bed watching me. It was dressed in some close-clinging white garment, spotted and stained with mould, and the face was that of the portrait. Overhead, the thunder cracked and roared, and when it ceased, the deathly stillness succeeded. I heard the rustle of movement coming nearer me, and, more horrible yet, perceived an odour of corruption and decay. And then a hand was laid on the side of my neck, and close by my ear I heard a quick-taken, eager breathing. Yet I knew this thing, though it could be perceived by touch, smell, by eye, and by ear, was still not of this earth, but something that had passed out of the body and had power to make itself manifest. And then a voice, already familiar to me, spoke. "I knew you would come to the room in the tower," it said. "I have been long waiting for you. At last you have come. Tonight I shall feast. Before long we shall feast together." And the quick breathing came closer to me. I could feel it on my neck. At that, the terror which I think had paralysed me for the moment gave way to the wild instinct of self-preservation. I hit wildly with both arms, kicking out at the same moment, and heard little animals squeal, and something soft dropped with a thud beside me. I took a couple of steps forward, nearly tripping over whatever it was that lay there, and by the merest good luck found the handle of the door. And in another second I ran out on the landing and banged the door behind me. Almost the same moment I heard a door open somewhere below, and John Clinton, candle in hand, came running upstairs. "What is it?" he said. "I sleep just below you, and I heard a noise as if— Good heavens, there's blood on your shoulder." I stood there, so he told me afterwards, swaying from side to side, white as a sheet, with the mark on my shoulder, as if a hand covered with blood had been laid there. "It's in there," I said, pointing. The portrait is in there too, hanging on the place we took it from." At that he laughed. "My dear fellow, this is a mere nightmare," he said. He pushed by me and opened the door, I standing there simply inert with terror, unable to stop him, unable to move. "Oh, what is that awful smell?" he said. Then there was silence. He had passed out of my sight behind the open door. Next moment he came out again, as white as myself, and instantly shut it. "Yes, the portrait's there," he said, "and on the floor is a thing spotted with earth, like what they bury people in. Come away, quick, come away." How I got downstairs I hardly know. An awful shuddering and nausea of the spirit rather than of the flesh had seized me, and more than once he had to place my feet upon the steps, while every now and then he cast glances of terror and apprehension up the stairs. But in time we came to his dressing room on the floor below, and there I told him what I have here described. The sequel can be made short. Indeed, some of my readers have perhaps already guessed what it was, if they remember that inexplicable affair of the churchyard at West Fawley some 8 years ago, where an attempt was made 3 times to bury the body of a certain woman who had committed suicide. On each occasion, the coffin was found in the course of a few days again protruding from the ground. After the 3rd attempt, in order that the thing should not be talked about, the body was buried elsewhere in unconsecrated ground. Where it was buried, just outside the iron gate of the garden belonging to the house where this woman had lived. She had committed suicide in a room at the top of the tower in that house. Her name was Julia Stone. Subsequently, the body was again secretly dug up, and the coffin was found to be full of blood.
That was Stories from the Shadows, presented by Borderline Radio. Join us again tomorrow at the intersection of sanity and revelation.
Thank you for listening to Stories from the Shadows, an audio production from Lemon Difficult Studio. If you enjoyed today's story, be sure to follow us on socials and join our Patreon at patreon.com/lemondifficult for exclusive rewards. Members of our free tier have access to all episodes of Stories from the Shadows, as well as behind-the-scenes content and the latest updates on our live immersive show, The Key of Dreams: Shadows Lengthen. Until next time, dream by daylight.